Hi all, Simone Jansen here. It's been a while. I've been traveling the globe, seems like, for quite a while. Some of you guys know what I've been up to. I left like a year ago and went and discovered the country, which was kind of awesome. And in the process, I ended up working with some really awesome people. Hey Lisa, good to see you. And so this has been really exciting because I got to meet with some people and work with some people who are truly change makers in this world, who are changing the status quo, who are pushing the envelope all the time. And it's been super inspiring and I've learned a lot of stuff. So I thought I'd share some of the stuff that I've been learning with you guys. And it's pretty interesting. A lot of times I find what is really affecting and stopping, slowing down people, leaders who are working with Fortune 500 companies is almost the same as if you're just somebody starting your first venture, if you're a first-time CEO. So one of the big ones that I've found is this product first thinking. And of course, when you're starting out, you need to have a good product first. Absolutely no argument about that. But at some point, the focus on product only is becoming kind of like that law of diminishing returns. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. So a lot of times what really happens is you get so focused on the product that you forget everything else. And the product is a little bit like it's the inside of your house, whereas, hey, Esther, oh my God, lots of people showing up. Hello, hello. Ask questions about this. So we're talking about leadership and how product first thinking is really not the best way to go for like an extended amount of time. So the biggest thing really is like you need to really go back to the roots a lot of times and really look at, okay, where am I going with this product? And a lot of times this clarity gets lost in the weeds when you're just constantly focusing on getting this thing done. So we'll talk about the product first thing, we talk about the clarity around this, and then we'll talk about what you need to do to scale all this stuff. Because at some point, once you have the product, once you have the people and the systems, you really need to show up differently. That means you have to become a leader. And that means you have to lead instead of do, and that means you have to really focus on your people, and people are like this entire can of worms that can end up being a really big issue. So we'll talk about those three things. So focusing again on the product. So you can't really spend too much time on getting this thing perfect. And this is where a lot of young CEOs, young leaders get really tripped up. Because what happens is if you want to get it perfect, you lose a ton of time. And time is not your friend. When you really want to hit that product market fit, when you want to catch that wave, catch that momentum, you have to do things as fast as possible. So a lot of times that means you have to go to market with something that is not perfect. And one of the first guys who really talked about that was Henry Ford. And I have huge respect for Henry Ford. He said a lot of really smart stuff. But one of them was imperfect action gets you to deliver value much, much sooner. So you want to deliver that value first. You want to push something out that's not perfect. Of course, it has to be decent. You don't want to have something that's completely broken. So it's got to be that good enough. And then you can come back in and fix it later on the back end. So a lot of times there's so much stuff that you can do that you can deliver to your clients and they don't even know there's certain things that are not working, and you can just kind of slide back in on the back end and fix it. So thinking about that good enough principle when you have a product to get out to is super important. Keep that in mind. So when we have that, once you have that good enough product in place, the next really important piece is to start focusing on your systems, your actual business. Because if you get stuck on that product, when it's time to scale, you miss the foundation. And so when you don't have that foundation and you put the pressure of scaling on that missing foundation, as in you don't have really a business around your product, you have a complete implosion. You got to be super clear on this. You have to create a system and you have to create processes around your product. Otherwise, you cannot scale no matter what. So that, again, you got to get away from the product, Create the systems, the processes, the people around your product so that you can scale what you're doing if you actually want to increase your valuation in the revenue of your company. So that's kind of like, think about what happens to a house. If you put a roof on before you have a really good frame, kaboom, doesn't work, right? So you have to think of your business the same way. So these systems really rely on having people on board. So you want to get your right people on your bus who can help you create all these systems, who can help you implement the systems, so that you as the leader, of course, you get to do what you do best, which is build relationships, bring the right people on board, all this kind of stuff. And you have this army of people helping you with it, right? So think about this. When you bring other people in, you have to be crystal clear. So that gets us to that second point, clarity. We have to get crystal clarity. And it sounds so benign, right? Everybody talks about, oh yeah, it's easy to be clear. You know, you need to have this vision, you need to have this mission, you need to have these values, all this kind of stuff that belongs to clarity. But actually, a lot of people are talking about it and very few have it. I've worked with, like I said, Fortune 500 leaders on this, just as people who are just getting their stuff together and launching. So this is something, even when you are already a super successful CEO or leader, you have to frequently go back and work on this, on that clarity piece. The more people you bring on, the more clear you have to be. Because if it's just you and you're just working on this thing, you can kind of futz with it, you can kind of cover over, but the more people you have with you, the more important it is that you have that really figured out. Because when you think about when you don't have, like, having this cohesive team will enable you to have a lot more company output, team output, and you need team output and company output to have revenue input, right? Company input. So output and input need to be kind of on the same level, otherwise it doesn't happen. So you can't increase your team and your company output without that alignment. And for that, you really have to get your priorities straight. What is, when you think about your customers, so the first thing to really get clear on is, who is your customer? And when I say customer, I'm not just talking about the end user who is paying for your product. I'm talking about your partners, your shareholders, your team, the people in the middle of all this. These are all your customers in a certain way. So get really clear on who's your customer, and then what are you doing for them, right? And a lot of times you think you're clear on that, but the longer you work on your product, the more input you get from other people, a lot of times the more cloudy, the more unclear that thing gets. Because instead of really focusing on your customer and focusing on their bleeding neck problems, like, you know, the blood is gushing out, you just start talking about, oh my God, your teeth are crooked. Let's just, if we deal with your crooked teeth, we don't have to look at the bleeding neck problem anymore. So you have to really be super clear on what is that main pain point, that biggest problem that your customer has, that they're absolutely willing to pay for, that they're absolutely willing to engage you for. And you can't get distracted by these shiny objects. So that's what that clarity piece is so important about. So that's that. And then, of course, this starts with you as the CEO, the leader of the company. We come back to that vision piece. You have to have a vision that is super crystal clear, where all the fluff is kind of left on the wayside, because you as the CEO, you're the conduit of clarity to your team. So if you're not clear, they can't be clear. If they are not clear, they're not going to deliver what you need them to. So it really has to translate to your people so that they can have the right focus. That means they're focused on the priorities, and the priorities is what gets you the revenue, what gets you the valuation. So right product at the right time with the right actions. And when I say right actions, a lot of times is the stuff that really translates into the outcome. So we have to really look at, you know, the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves, and it's important to make those distinctions every single day so you don't get distracted by this other stuff that might sound funner, easier, faster to get, all this stuff. Again, coming back to clarity. All right, so with all that, we have the priorities now, we have the clarity, so then it takes you as the leader coming back and really leading your team to victory. And so you have the clarity, you have the people on board, you're leading them now. So that means you have to get out of doing. And for young leaders, and actually people who've been around the block a bunch of times, it's still the same thing a lot of times. It's really hard to let go of your baby, right? It's really hard to step back and let others do. Because a lot of times when you start out, you're doing everything. But that has to go away. You have to let go of that at some point and let others take over. Hopefully others who are a whole lot better at what they do than you would ever be. But to be able to scale your company, you have to get better at letting go and letting them do their job. And you just do the stuff that you should be doing as the CEO, which is, again, the relationships, the vision, the bigger picture, the bringing everybody together, the hiring, all that stuff. So that's really what your job should be versus everything else, which you might have been doing so far. But so far is really the part. So you have to get into leading instead of doing. And that means you're leading a team. That means you have a whole bunch of people on board. That means it's time to get really consistent about living your plan. That means you have to have a plan. And that has to be a really kick-ass plan. And when I'm saying a kick-ass plan, a lot of people plan, a lot of people set goals. And you know what? It's the beginning of February at this point. And I've been hearing a lot of people say that, yeah, they set goals, but they don't even remember anymore what they were, 5 weeks ago. So a plan a lot of times doesn't translate into anything but wasted time, because it's not done in a way, it's not done with a process that actually produces results and actions every day. And those actions that are crystal clear, that are aligned, that are priorities, that produce real outcomes that can help you take your company to the next level. So we need that consistent alignment with your team. So first you and the vision and the clarity, then the consistent alignment with the team so that you have your engineering, your product, your ops, your marketing, all that stuff on the same page and constantly pushing on the same thing at the same time at the right speed. So that's got to happen, right? And then the next thing is you have to consistently surface problems. And for a lot of people, that's a really hard thing to do, because we don't want to talk about the problems. We want to talk about what works. But when you consistently surface problems and you do it in an aligned way, and you do it in a way where it enables you to move quickly, you're agile, you can fix things quickly, it is going to save you so much time. So really think about that, being very agile with the way that you surface problems. And then, of course, you have to have consistent communication around that. And consistent communication, that's another big weak point, another big blind spot for new leaders, because it's hard to have those conversations. It's hard to deliver unpopular news, unpopular opinions, unpopular decisions. And a lot of times, the more people you get on board and the more you have to really focus on the nitty-gritty, the harder that gets. And people just don't want to hear what you have to say at that point. But the thing is, if you don't say it, you can't get any further with your company. So having those conversations I've heard somebody say before, the level of conversation that you can have is going to determine the level of business that you can have. So if you are really able to have a hard conversation, you're able to lead a company that's massive. So think about that. You really have to get really good at having those challenging conversations so that you can take your company to that bigger level. So we talked about clarity. We talked about how you can't really focus on your product for too long. And we talked about how it's really important to focus on your people. So really, in the end, it's your team. It's having a really, really great process, and then scaling you as the leader, so you have the leadership skills that you need to have to create this bigger company, and that's it. So most people aren't born with those skills, even if you've been to business school, if you've been around the block a few times. a lot of times you don't really know how to do these things right. And, you know, my favorite saying is, don't try this alone. You want to have somebody by your side to do this. So we still offer free strategy sessions. Go to bulletproofstartups.com. There's a kick-ass training on all this stuff. So if you want to find out more about how to do this right, how to get your company really in front of people and do it the right way, go to bulletproofstartups.com, watch the training, and at the end of the training, it's going to give you an opportunity to sign up for a free session with me. I'd highly recommend you do it, and I will see you then. Cheers.